Hello, I'm Donna Hughes. Welcome to this podcast called We Can and We Must. Here we discuss how to be a force for freedom and democracy and how to be a force for women's rights. Today I want to talk about women's voting rights. That may think we're going to go back over 100 years to talk about suffrage, but in fact we're going to talk about what's happening in 2026 in the United States because our right to vote is under attack. Right now, Donald Trump and the GOP have introduced a bill in Congress that's called the SAVE Act. It's called Safeguard American Eligibility Act. And you may think that sounds positive, but let me get into discussing it. As they always say when I would do some work in Washington, D.C., the devil is in the details. Democracy Doc has called this the most restrictive voting bill to ever be passed uh, in America, that it will disenfranchise millions of voters across the country. One of the things it's going to do is going to require an ID to vote. You may think, actually, that's not such a bad idea. Is that really so horrible? In fact, many people are pointing out how you need an ID to do almost anything. But here's the problem: no longer will just your driver's license be sufficient. Now they want you to have either real ID or a proof of citizenship. That requires a birth certificate. Now, I wonder how many of you even know where your birth certificate is. And remember, if you find it can't be just a photocopy. It has to be a certified certificate. Either that or you have to have a passport. Problem with that is that 52% of the United States, of citizens in the United States, do not have passports. So already that's going to be a challenge for some people. This requirement to produce proof of citizenship is going to fall most heavily on women and most heavily on married women. Because one of the things that's going to be required, and that is the proof of citizenship that you have, such as a birth certificate, has to match your driver's license. And that's going to be a challenge for a lot of married women. Okay, before I proceed with this, I want to talk about experience that I had many decades ago when I voted in Half Moon Township, a semi-rural township in Pennsylvania. It's where I live right now. I got married in the Methodist church that was there. When I got married, I was a feminist. I still consider myself a feminist. And I decided that I didn't want to change my last name. I was going to keep my last name. So I just thought that's all I had to do was make that decision. Well, at the time, I was a student at Penn State University. And after I got married, I returned to class. And in the department where I was a student, I was enthusiastically greeted by the secretaries there. They said, "Oh, congratulations, congratulations. We helped you out. We already changed your name on all the records in the university." And I thought, oh, I said, I wasn't going to change my name. They looked rather horrified and looked at each other and then just went silent. And so one thing they didn't do, I do remember this, they did not offer to go back and reverse it. So I walked away and I thought, well, maybe it'll just be the records at the university. It won't be that bad. And I kept on using my maiden name, which was Smith. A couple years went by and I got a renewal for my driver's license. And one of the questions on it is, have you been married since the last renewal of your driver's license? And I thought, well, yes. And I'm not going to lie. And they said, well, what's the name? And I said, Hugh, wrote down Hughes. One of the things I noticed was that there didn't seem to be an option to say, well, I got married, the married name is Hughes, but I want to keep Smith on my driver's license. So that meant that the name was changed on the driver's license, and I didn't see any other option. A couple more years went by, and at the time I kept voting in Half Moon Township. But on this particular date, I walked in, and there were the usual ladies. I knew them all. They had been my 4-H leaders and went to church with them. And they said, "Hello, Donna. This time is going to be the last time we will let you vote unless you change your name on the voter roll." And I didn't know what to say. I mean, what could I say? But I was rather flabbergasted that they could tell me that I had to change my name on the voter roll or I was not going to be allowed to vote. So I did, and been known as Donna Hughes for decades. So it's now interesting to think, as although decades have passed, I'm now facing a similar situation in which I have a driver's license in which my name is Donna Hughes. And if I go and dig out my birth certificate, it says Donna Smith. They do not match. And they said that they have to match. Okay, what are the alternatives if they don't match? One of the things is that you can go get a you can go get a passport. Problem with that is that they cost money and it takes time. If your driver's license does not match your birth certificate. The only thing you can do is to get a real ID, which generally requires a passport. But certainly you're going to need a certified birth certificate. One of the things about this is a voter suppression bill. We need to be very clear what this is. This is not to uh, make sure it's easier to vote or easier for people to vote. One of the things is that they estimate that this may result in purging almost 20 million people from the voter roll. And this is going to affect, like I said, mostly women, mostly poor people, mostly people who don't have um, transportation. One of the things is that they may be aiming to hurt women in particular and married women. But it's probably going, in this particular area, it's going to hurt more Republicans because in this area, Democrats are more likely to have a passport, they're more likely to have higher educations, and women are more likely to have kept their maiden names than in other places. So I think it's interesting that I don't know about urban areas, but in rural areas, this is more likely to hurt more Republican women than it is Democrat women. One of the challenges is they're making it increasingly difficult to get a passport if that's what route you want to take. I just found this in the paper this morning. It said, State Department orders nonprofit libraries to stop processing passport applications. It used to be that there were a lot of libraries in which you could go there and apply for a passport and fill out the application there. But according to this, the agency which regulates U.S. passports began issuing cease and desist orders to not-for-profit libraries last fall, informing them that they are no longer authorized to participate in the Passport Acceptance Facility program as of Friday. There was one particular library that they questioned for this article, and it said that in the Otis Library in Connecticut had been offering passport services for 18 years, but they were no longer going to be able to do that. So that means it's going to be even more difficult for people to get a passport if that's what they want to do. One of the things that this bill will do also, and that is that it will uh, require states to check their voter rolls with a federal database, not with their own local and state databases. And that's one of the reasons why they're saying that they can't allow anyone else to help process passports. The House of Representatives has already passed this bill, and it's on its way to the Senate. In fact, this is Saturday afternoon, and they want to have a vote on it by Wednesday in the Senate. And Trump is trying to be tough about it. He's saying if the Senate does not pass this bill, I'm going to take unilateral action. Said there will be voter ID for the midterm elections. That's next November, 2026, whether approved by Congress or not. Earlier in the month, and this is still February, he has urged Republicans to seize control over elections and place voting under national authority. So, this is what we're facing right now, attempting to nationalize elections, which have always been under the control of the state. And most of the authority really is in the local level. You know, when you go to the local level, like all those people that I are just sitting there that I've known for years and years, uh, they have the election authority. Well, at the county level is where the election authority is, and then it goes to the state. The federal government really has very little to do with the running of elections, and the founders of this country designed it that way. That's the way they wanted. That's called separation of powers. But Trump says this is now over. And I think that women, particularly married women, are the ones that could really lose the franchise, as they call it, lose right to vote, or it makes it so difficult that you can't access the vote. One of the things you can do, I suggest, of course, is to get educated. You can do that by reading Democracy Docket on the internet, podcast, and YouTube. You can also listen to Heather Cox Richardson, a historian who almost daily talks about what's happening in the country and relates it to what has happened historically in the United States. But I think that we're facing some very, very serious times. And uh, we need to become active and find ways that we can stop this. Thank you.